Hello guys, Sir Levy is back. So last time we talked about the neurons, its parts, its kinds, and its function. And we also already know about the circulation of the neurons all throughout the body, from the brain to the different parts of the body, the functions of the parts of the neurons. Let's move on to our discussion. So last time we have discussed the function of the synapse, which serves as the transporter of the signals coming from the neurons. So siya ang pumapagitan sa mga nerve cells natin para makapag-transfer ng information, and also from the nerve cells to the muscle cells. So yung chemicals na nandoon sa synapse natin to carry messages across the synapse to the dendrite or cell body of a receiver of neuron ay yung tinatawag nating neurotransmitters. So ang neurotransmitter ay from neuron to neuron, nakakapag-transfer ng messages sa pamagitan nitong neurotransmitter. So kung halimbawa sobra-sobra ang neurotransmitters natin or these chemicals, pwede siyang mag-produce ng unnecessary movements o pwede magbigay ng psychological disorder or behavioral disorders. Pwede na naman pagkakulang, ganun din, sobra o kulang sa tinatawag nating chemicals na neurotransmitters, maaaring mag-produce ng any disorder or behavioral disorder. If you can still remember, I asked you whether there is free will or none. So this is it. So ang answer natin in psychology, there is no free will. Okay, these chemicals are the drivers of our behavior. First, we have the acetylcholine. Okay, its location can be found in the brain, the spinal cord, the peripheral nervous system, especially some organs of the parasympathetic nervous system. So its effect is to excite in the brain, autonomic nervous system, or inhibitory elsewhere. So when we say excitatory or inhibitory, ang naapektuhan nito ay yung action potential ng ating neuron. So when we say excitatory, magkakaroon ng action potential. So magti-trigger ng action potential that leads the neuron to transfer information. On the other hand, when we say inhibitory, ito ay pumipigil naman na magkaroon ng action potential. So therefore, walang movement ang ating neuron at walang matatransfer na information. So ang effect ng ating acetylcholine ay nag-i-inhibit or nag-excite ng ating brain. So ang function ng ating acetylcholine ay sa mga muscle movements natin and also the cognitive functioning. So kung gusto mong mag-work yan, you need to excite the brain and nervous system para magkaroon ng muscle movement and cognitive functioning. You need to have this kind of chemical, yung acetylcholine. So kung gusto niyo madagdagan ng iyong acetylcholine levels, kumain kayo ng mga to: egg yolks, chocolate, peanut butter, broccoli, chicken breast, beef, scallops, Brussels sprouts, salmon, and wheat germ. Next, we have the number 2 or the norepinephrine. So it is located in the brain system natin, and its effect is to excite, or it has an effect of excitatory. So the function of this chemical is for the mood and aggression. So tinatawag din itong stress hormone. So if you are stressed and you have this mood swing and you are very aggressive, dumadami ang level of norepinephrine mo. Kapag sobrang konti ng norepinephrine mo o yung rage hormone natin, it can lead to depression, o kaya naman may poor memory, lack of energy, kulang ka sa enerhiya, concentration, pati sa motivation. Pero dapat balance lang. So, okay? So pag kinukulang ka ng ating ganitong hormone, you need to do something. Kapag sobrang ganun din, it increases blood pressure, heart rate, causes hyperactivity, masyadong hyper, pwede rin magkaroon ng anxiety, irritability, and insomnia. To increase your norepinephrine, we have these practices. So exercise, sleep, small accomplishments, music, even meditation, and eating dopamine-rich foods such as chocolate. And if you want to normalize your norepinephrine, of course, balance lang dapat ang exercise, sleep, and other things. Next chemical, we have the glutamate, okay, located in the brain and spinal cord, and its effect is excitatory. And the function is for the memory. So if there is balance between GABA and glutamate, GABA is the calming neurotransmitter and the glutamate is the excitatory neurotransmitter. So kapag marami ang ating glutamate, maaaring magresulta ito ng anxiety or hyperactivity, impulsivity, so yung night wakings, gising sa gabi, movement and motor control, and release of adrenaline, etc. So, dapat balance ito with the GABA or the hormones that give us calmness. So, here are the foods that gives us more glutamate. We have the caviar, cheese, seafood, salami, seaweeds, soy, noodle dishes, or fermented beans. Okay, we have this tomato. We have mushrooms, crackling chips, savory snacks, spinach. Next, we have the gamma-aminobutyric acid or GABA. It's located in our brain and spinal cord. Its effect is to inhibit or nag-slow down. In short, it's calmness hormones. So its function is to eating, aggression, and sleeping. So if you want to calm yourself, you can eat the following. Next, we have the dopamine inside the brain. So, its effect is inhibiting and excreting or nag-eliminate or nag-distract or nag-stop. Okay? So, the function of muscle disorders, mental disorders, Parkinson's disease. So, yung proper supply natin ng dopamine can cure muscle disorders, mental disorders, and even Parkinson's disease. Na i-discuss natin sa mga susunod na topics. And in order for you to gain some dopamine, ito ang dapat nyong kainin. We have the apple, banana, strawberries, watermelon, pumpkin seeds, salmon, beetroot, eggs, almonds, and dark chocolates. Next, we have the serotonin. It's located in the brain and the spinal cord. Ang effect nito ay inhibitory or it distracts. And the function is for sleeping, proper sleeping, eating, mood, pain, and even depression. So for us to stop the pain and depression, even the mood, we need and to balance our eating and sleeping, we need to take some serotonin. And if you are depressed, ito ang kailangan yung kainin at gawin. You need to eat walnuts, energy booster, green smoothie, almond, and you need to relax your body and your mind. You have some walking, eat some pepper, smiling, drinking water, banana, yan, leafy green foods, and even Epsom salt. Next topic, we have the reflex action. So it comes from the afferent and the efferent neurons. When we say afferent, it is sensory neuron, and when we say efferent, it is a motor neuron. So what is a reflex actions? So reflex actions are reflexes which are automatic, involuntary responses to incoming stimuli. So ito ay hindi mo piniling gawin but absolutely involuntary. Depende kung ano ang stimulus na nag-trigger para tayo ay kumilos ng ganon. So mga examples yan ay yung automatic na pagpikit ng ating mata at yung automatic na pagdepensa ng ating parte ng katawan kapag may alam tayong tatama na foreign object. So they are electrochemical impulses transmitted to the spinal cord up to the brain. Hence, interaction takes place. So, from the spinal cord, magta-transmit yan ng impulse to the brain that tells the brain, no, kung ano ang dapat natin gawin. So, reflexes are the simplest synaptic connections that are transmitted directly from sensory to motor neurons, describing a sensory motor arc, causing the individuals to respond prior to the impulses that had reached the cerebral cortex. So, yung figure 5 natin, as you can see, ito yun, no? So, after na ma-trigger yung ating sensory neuron o yung tinatawag nating afferent neuron. So, for example, meron tayong nakita, narinig, naamoy, na-touch, or basta through the senses, no? Magsisend ngayon ng message yan sa brain. And itong brain natin, magsisend siya ng message sa ating motor neuron. Okay? At yung motor neuron ngayon, automatically, magre-react siya doon sa sensory neuron o sa message ng sensory neuron that gives us reflex. Gaya ng pagpikit ng mata, pagdepensa ng katawan kapag may tatama. Well, that's what we call reflex action. So the connectors or the nervous systems are mechanisms that integrate sensory system or receptors and motor systems or effectors, causing an individual to respond as a coordinated organism. So ang connectors natin ay yung tinatawag nating nervous system that includes the brain and the spinal cord na nagko-connect sa sensory neuron natin at saka sa ating motor neuron. So whatever the senses receive as message from the receptors natin o sa ating mata, tenga, ilong, yan ay automatic ma-send sa brain at itong brain ngayon o the nervous system per se will send or transmit message to the different parts of the body, papasok siya sa motor neuron. The reason why we act upon according to the transmitted messages from the neurons of sensory neurons to the motor neurons. Figure 6 in the next page is shown the schematic diagram of the relationship of the parts of the brain on the nervous system. They are composed of two coordinated systems such as the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So nahati sa dalawa ang nervous system natin, the peripheral and the central nervous system. So here are the divisions of the nervous system. First, we have the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Under the central nervous system, we have the brain and the spinal cord. And the other side is the peripheral nervous system, which is composed of somatic division and automatic division. Under automatic division, we have the sympathetic division and parasympathetic division. So let's first have the brain as part of the central nervous system. So the brain is a massive, soft, spongy, mottled nervous tissue and pinkish gray in color found inside the skull. So the higher the complex mental processes that differentiate man from lower forms of animals take place in the highly developed system of the brain, the cerebral cortex or the new brain. It has the ability to allow human intellectual to flourish as it guides our behavior and thoughts. The brain is shown in figure 7 in the next page. So these are the structures and the areas of the human brain. So we have this what we call cerebrum, the amygdala, the cerebellum, the brainstem, spinal cord, the reticular formation, the corpus callosum, the thalamus, hypothalamus, hippocampus, pituitary gland, the pons, and the medulla. And we have the midbrain. First, let's have the cerebrum or the cerebral cortex. It is responsible for sensing, thinking, learning, emotion, consciousness, and voluntary movement. So the work of the cerebrum ay to sense, and ito rin yung nagbibigay sa atin ng power to think and power to learn. Even our emotion is coming from the function of the cerebrum, pati consciousness, and the voluntary movement. Okay, yung amygdala naman is part of the limbic system involved in emotion and aggression. Dito papasok yung tinatawag nating emotion na fight or flight. So when you are in danger, it can be fight or flight. Kapag na unahan ka ng takot, it comes from the amygdala that gives you the idea of flight. And when you have the courage to fight, syempre you will stay at that event or situation, then tawag natin doon is to fight. So that's the emotion that could be given by the amygdala, fight or flight. Next is the cerebellum, structure that coordinates fine muscle movement and balance. So pagdating sa balance, cerebellum ang may responsibility sa atin. So when you are losing your balance, it is the responsibility of the cerebellum. Next, we have the brainstem. Ang brainstem natin ay binubuo ng medulla oblongata, midbrain, and pons. So these three components has its own unique structure and function. So together, they help to regulate breathing. So nag-regulate ng breathing natin, ng heart rate natin, blood pressure, and several other important functions ay yung tinatawag nating brainstem. So next, we have the spinal cord, which is responsible for transmitting information between the brain and the rest of the body. So ang nagko-connecta ng information from the brain and to the parts of the body ay yung tinatawag nating spinal cord. Handles simple reflexes. Siya rin na nagsisend ng message to handle the reflexes o yung action reflex na sinasabi natin kanina. Reticular formation is the group of fibers that carry stimulation related to sleep and arousal through brainstem. So the brainstem gives signal to the reticular formation na nagbibigay sa atin ng stimulation para tayo ay makatulog or matulog, and even the sexual arousal. Yan ang nagpo-provide sa atin ng libido. So reticular formation. Next, we have the corpus callosum. It is the bridge of fibers passing information between the two cerebral hemispheres. Yun nga yung left and the right hemisphere. So yung left and right hemispheres natin, yan yung ang nagko-connect sa dalawa na yan ay yung corpus callosum. Kung papansin niyo, the brain is composed of the two hemispheres, the left and the right. Pag na-check natin mamaya, makikita nyo that there is left and right brain. So ang dudugtong sa kanila yung corpus callosum. Next, we have the thalamus. So yung tinatawag nating relay center for cortex. Handles incoming and outgoing signals. Siya ang nagpapadala ng messages going to the cortex. The information from the midbrain shall be sent to the cerebral cortex through the thalamus. Daanan siya ng information from the midbrain to the cerebral cortex. So we have the next hypothalamus, responsible for regulating basic biological needs like hunger, thirst, temperature control. So yung nagko-control ng ating temperature of the body is the hypothalamus. Even the hunger, gutom at uhaw ang nagbibigay sa atin ng information na tayo gutom na ay ang hypothalamus. Next is the hippocampus, part of limbic system involved in learning and memory. So one of the parts of the structure of the brain that gives us the power to memorize and to have memory ay yung hippocampus. So next we have the pituitary gland. It is the master gland that regulates other endocrine glands. So yung pituitary gland ay yung master gland na nag-regulate ng endocrine gland natin na nagpo-produce ng growth hormones. So hindi lang growth hormones but also the hormones that could be secreted by the pineal gland, the pancreas, the ovaries, the testes, thyroid gland, parathyroid gland, hypothalamus, and adrenaline glands. So siya ang master gland ng all glands in the brain. Next, we have the pons, involved in sleeping and arousal. So isa siya sa mga nag-regulate ng sleeping natin and also arousal. Medulla is responsible for regulating largely unconscious functions such as breathing and circulation. So in terms of breathing and circulation, ang isa sa mga nag-regulate ng parts of the brain na yung tinatawag nating medulla. Ang midbrain naman natin ay it's the part of the brain that is associated with the vision, hearing, motor control, sleep, and wakefulness. Sama din yung arousal and alertness, even temperature regulation. So next we have the layers of the brain. One is the central core. It is sometimes called old brain. All vertebrates that control the basic functions such as breathing, eating, and sleeping. So old brain, because its evolutionary underpinnings can be traced back some 500 million years to primitive structures found in non-human species. It includes the brainstem, medulla oblongata, a narrow structure that can control breathing, heartbeat, and blood circulation, and reflexes that enable the organisms maintain an upright position. So ang central core natin, it is the layer of the brain that is composed of the medulla oblongata, the brain's stem. So yung medulla oblongata natin, that's the narrow structure that controls breathing, yung paghinga, heartbeat, and blood circulation. Even the reflexes na kung saan nagbibigay sa atin ng kakayahan, even other organisms, to have an upright position. At this point, the major nerve tracts coming up from the spinal cord passes through the right side of the brain, is linked to the left side of the body, and the left side of the brain to the right side of the body. Cerebellum is attached to the rear of the brainstem, slightly above the medulla oblongata, which is a convoluted shape. So the right side of the brain natin is controlling the left side of the body, and the left side of the brain natin, it controls the right side of the body. Next layer of the brain, we have the limbic system. This system is the middle layer of the brain. It is closely interconnected with the amygdala, hippocampus, hypothalamus, and other structures. It involves in emotion drive, motivation, and memory. So next we have the cerebrum. It is the topmost layer of the brain, and the bulbous cap covering the limbic system almost and accounted for 2/3 of the total mass of the human brain, which is the reason that differentiates man from lower animals. So this is the cerebrum. So the cerebrum is the largest part of the brain. So the cerebrum is highly developed in human beings. It is the seat of higher cognitive functioning. Its outer layer is termed the cerebral cortex. Cortex is derived from the Latin for bark or shell. So therefore, the cerebrum is the largest part of the brain, and it distinguishes the human being from other creatures like animals. The brain appears gray because it has a huge of nerve cell bodies and unmyelinated fibers, hence the term gray matter, primarily composed of nerve cell bodies and dendrites, and an internal white core composed of axons that connect areas of the hemispheres with each other and with other parts of the brain. So ang cerebrum natin or cerebral hemispheres natin are divided into two. So we have the left and the right hemisphere. The right hemisphere controls left side of the body, and the left hemisphere controls right side of the body. Figure 9 is shown in the right side, the top view of cerebral hemispheres. Next, we have the lobes of the brain. We have the frontal lobe, temporal lobe, parietal lobe, and the occipital lobe. Let's first have the frontal lobe, which is responsible for the speech production, reading fluency, grammatical usage, and comprehension. Ang responsible dyan ay yung frontal lobe natin. Yung temporal lobe naman is for verbal memory, phonological awareness, decoding and discriminating sounds. Is more on sounds. And next we have the parietal lobe, links spoken and written language to memory to give it meaning so we can understand what we hear and read. And of course, the occipital lobe, where the primary visual cortex is located, important in the identification of letters. So when you are reading and you are comprehending, ang responsible sa ating four lobes ay yung frontal lobe. When we are actually memorizing the verbal sounds and decoding discriminating sounds, ang tawag natin ay temporal lobe. And yung nagli-link naman sa spoken word and written language at yung memory natin about that so we can understand those things ay ginagamitan natin ng parietal lobe. Ang occipital lobe naman ay responsible for the visual memory ng letters natin. So that's occipital lobe. Next, we have the spinal cord. So the spinal cord is a huge rope-like segment of nerve tissue extending downward the vertebral column or the backbone, primarily serving as the connector mechanism for spinal reflexes and a joining link between the spinal, vertebral, or backbones at regular intervals are the spinal nerves. Spinal nerves have two roots, namely a dorsal root toward the back brings sensory nerve fibers, and a ventral root toward the front brings motor nerve fibers. So, ang spinal cord natin ay nag-hold ng dalawang klase ng spinal nerves. So, we have the dorsal root and the ventral root. Ang dorsal root ay nag-handle ng mga sensory neurons coming from the sensory nerve fibers. At yung ventral root naman natin ay nag-hold ng mga motor neurons na dala-dala ng tinatawag nating motor nerve fibers. So, napakahalaga nitong dalawang ito. Kung wala ito, wala tayong masisense, wala rin tayong maikikilos. Any lesion or destroyed spinal nerves in any parts of the body connected with them would be disabled. Pwede magkaroon ng problema any broken spinal nerve sa sensory or motor neuron natin. So the spine, also called the vertebral or spinal column, is composed of a series of bones called vertebrae. And there are four regions of the spine, namely, so number 1, we have the cervical or the neck, thoracic or the chest on the trunk, lumbar, low back, and the sacral o sa pelvic region natin. Each individual vertebra has unique features depending on the region in which it is found, kung saan siya makikita. So every vertebra, regardless of location, has three basic functional parts, namely the drum-shaped vertebral body designed to bear weight and withstand compression or loading. And second function is tagadugtong o yung nagdudugtong sa ating backbone, posterior backside arch. So gawa siya sa lamina and pedicles and facet joints. And the third is kapitan ng muscles, which is the transverse processes. Spinal cord is shown figure 11 in the next page. So after the central nervous system, let's move on to the peripheral nervous system. Pero ano na nga pala yung iba't ibang divisions of the central nervous system? We have the brain and the spinal cord. So let's now move on to peripheral nervous system, which is consists of the nerves connecting the brain and the spinal cord to other parts of the body. So ang PNS o yung peripheral nervous system natin ay binubuo nito yung mga nerves na umiikot sa buong katawan. So PNS divided into somatic system and autonomic system. So somatic system is a part of the PNS that sends voluntary messages from CNS or central nervous system to the skeletal muscles. So yung somatic system is that part of the PNS or peripheral nervous system na nagsisend ng voluntary messages mula sa central nervous system natin or the brain and the spinal cord to the skeletal muscles natin. So PNS conducts impulses to and from the CNS to other sides of the soma or yung soma tinatawag din nating body. The sensory nerves fibers of the somatic system transmit information about external stimulation from the skin, muscles, and joints to the central nervous system. Sensory nerves are responsible for pain, pressure, and temperature. So yung mga somatic system natin, o yung mga nerves natin under somatic system ay nagsisend ng message from the skin, muscles, and joints going to the central nervous system and going back to the soma or the body. And of course, the sensory nerves are responsible for pain, pressure, and temperature. Okay? Na nanggagaling sa ating mga sensory receptors na diniscuss ko sa inyo kanina. On the other hand, the motor nerve fibers naman, hindi sensory nerves, no? Motor nerve fibers of the somatic system transmit impulses from the central nervous system to the muscles of the body, with which motor nerves initiate movement. Kanina sa skeletal muscles natin, going to the soma. This time, ito naman ay mula sa motor nerves natin that initiates movement. Muscles of the body to the nervous system natin or central nervous system natin dadalhin sa iba't ibang parte ng katawan to initiate movement. All the muscles that are responsible for voluntary and involuntary movements in posture and balance are controlled by the motor nerves. So for example, the brain of the encoder transmits information with which fingers to use on what keys and his fingers return feedback on his position and movement. When the encoder touches the wrong key, the somatic system signals the brain regarding things to correct so that he can swiftly delete the error and places the right key. So sabi nga dyan, when we are actually typing something on our keyboard, kapag tayo ay nagkakamali ng ating tinatype, automatically nagsisend ng message ang ating somatic system to the central nervous system at sinasabi nito na kailangan palitan yung error and we need to delete it and then type the new one. Okay? So, nagsisend siya ng initiation to have movement. So, ang peripheral nervous system natin has two major nerves. So, may tinatawag tayong cranial nerves and spinal nerves. So, the cranial nerves serve as sensory nerves for vision, audition, olfaction, and gustation, and motor nerves for the eyeball, jaw, tongue, and other parts of the neck. Moreover, there are 12 parts of nerves as shown in figure 12 in the next page. 12 pairs of nerves as enumerated below. So, we have the olfactory nerve, which is for smell, optic nerve, which is for vision, oculomotor nerve, which is for the eyelid and eyeball movement, trochlear nerve, which innervates superior oblique and turns eye downward and laterally, trigeminal nerve, which is for chewing, face and mouth and touch and pain, abducens nerve, turns eye laterally, facial nerve, which controls most facial expressions, secretion of tears and saliva and even taste. See, meron pa pala tayong facial nerves. Next, we have vestibulocochlear or auditory nerve, which is for hearing and equilibrium sensation. So when we say equilibrium, alam nyo na, it's about balance. Next, glossopharyngeal nerve, which is for the taste and senses, carotid blood pressure. Vagus nerve senses aortic blood pressure, slows heart rate, stimulates digestive organs, and taste. Spinal accessory, which is controlling trapezius and sternocleidomastoid and controls swallowing movements. So hypoglossal nerve controls tongue movement. So all over the faces, including our tongue, including our ears, ay meron palang mga nerves inside that. So itong mga ito ay tinatawag na cranial nerves na isa sa mga tinatawag nating major nerves of the peripheral nervous system. And next we have the spinal nerves. And of course, next we have the spinal nerves, which serves as the sensory and motor nerves for shoulder, chest, the trunk, upper and lower extremities. Okay, yung mga nerves na yan, and in the spinal cord, yan yung mga nerves na sinasabi natin ino-operate ng somatic system natin. If you can still remember, ang PNS natin ay na-divide sa dalawa, yung somatic system and autonomic system. So, we had discussed the somatic system na nasa loob ng ating spinal cord or also inside the muscles and the skeletals na kung saan meron siyang sensory nerves and the motor nerves. Now, let's move on to another division of the peripheral nervous system, which is the autonomic nervous system. So, or what we see here as ANS. Autonomic means self-regulating, self-governing, independent, or involuntary. So, hindi natin siya kontrolado. It is the part of the PNS that sends messages away from the brain to the smooth muscles, internal organs, glands. More specifically, the main functions are, here it is. So, number one, it is responsible for emotional behavior such as stress or other heightened emotions. It also involves motor behavior. It regulates bodily processes such as respiration, digestion, and arousal. It also performs during relaxation, sleep, maintains life processes during anesthesia and coma. So, ang autonomic nervous system natin ay nagsisend ng message from the central nervous system to the muscles o smooth muscles natin, hindi basta muscles, smooth muscles natin, internal organs, yung intestine, and glands, at yung mga pituitary gland and other glands natin, pineal glands, whatsoever. So, ang mga functions ng ating autonomic nervous system ay yung una for emotional behavior. So, sa stress natin, pagtaas ng emosyon, even motor behavior, yung mga pagdabog-dabog natin. It regulates bodily processes such as respiration. Paghinga natin, etong autonomic nervous system natin ang bahala dito. Even digestion, even arousal natin. So, si autonomic nervous system pala ang nag-ooperate nito. It also performs during relaxation, sa pagtulog natin, nandyan din siya, and maintains life processes during anesthesia and coma. So, ang nag-ooperate lang na senses natin ay sa pamagitan ng mga parts of the autonomic nervous system o yung mga nerves na maliliit na ito na nagko-connect sa brain at sa different smooth muscles natin, internal organs, and even glands. So, merong dalawang major divisions ito. So, we have here sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. Ano ba ang ginagawa ng parasympathetic at sympathetic nerves natin? So, ang parasympathetic nerves natin, under parasympathetic nervous system natin, it constricts the pupils o yung isinasara nito ang ating pupils sa mata. It stimulates saliva o naglalaway ka because of parasympathetic nerves natin. It slows heartbeat, pinapabagal ang heartbeat, constricts airways o isinasara ng bahagya yung ating daanan ng hangin. Nag-i-stimulate siya ng gallbladder natin na nag-i-store ng bile na naglulusaw ng food natin sa intestine. Stimulates activity of the stomach o it lets the stomach grind. Stimulates activity of intestines natin, yung ating intestine, and it's contracting bladder o yung nag-i-squeeze ng bladder natin, the reason why kung bakit tayo naiihi. On the other hand, we have the sympathetic nerves. Here are the functions of sympathetic nerves. One is dilating pupils o nagbubukas ang pupil, inhibiting salivation o hindi ka napipigilan ka sa paglalaway, increasing heartbeat, pampabilis ng heartbeat, relax airways, nagsisend ng message to relax yung airways natin o dahanan ng hangin, inhibit activity of stomach, so pinipigilan nito yung grinding of the stomach, inhibit gallbladder o yung nag-stop to ng pag-release ng ating fluid o bile para maglusaw ng food sa stomach. Inhibit activity of intestine, so in-stop din ito ang grinding of the intestine. Secretes epinephrine or norepinephrine. Nag-release siya ng energy hormone at saka yung stress hormone. Relaxing the bladder, the reason why hindi tayo naiihi. So that is the function of, these are the functions of sympathetic nerves. Between the interaction of the stimulus and a response, may tinatawag tayong effectors. These are the muscles and glands which act as a response over efferent or motor neurons natin. So, ang motor neurons natin, alam natin yan, it gives us the message of movement. So, yung mga effectors, so naapektuhan ng motor neurons natin, ng mga muscles that gives us movement and glands na nagpupush natin to move, ang tawag natin sa kanila ay effectors. So, glands are specialized organs located throughout the body that secrete specialized substance such as sweat, pawis, milk, or particular hormone. So we have two systems of effectors. We have the muscular and the glandular system. Let's first have the muscular system. Muscular system is composed of the contractile units specialized to move other organs in the body. So para makakilos yung iba't ibang parte ng katawan natin, we need this muscular system which is composed of muscles. A muscle is made up of muscle fibers or myofibrils that are composed of proteins, myosin, and actin. The reason why lumalaki mga muscles natin if we are taking proteins, myosin, and actin, yun yung tinitake na pills ng mga nag-exercise o nag-gym. Smooth cardiac and skeletal muscles are three types. Figure 15 is shown in right side. You can see in the picture there are three kinds of muscles. One is smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and skeletal muscle. Inside your organs, especially the intestine, stomach, yan ang smooth muscle natin. The reason why it moves because of that muscle. Ang muscle na ito ay involuntary at hindi natin to kontrolado. Next, we have the cardiac muscle o yung muscle na nandito sa loob ng ating puso. So, it gives us the support and movement of the heart. Gaya ng smooth muscle natin, ang cardiac muscle ay involuntary. But we have skeletal muscle which is voluntary. So ito naman yung pumapalibot sa ating buto. Okay, the reason why we can move our body. Ang skeletal muscle ay tinatawag ding striated muscle na nasa loob ng ating jaw, eyes, head, bones, trunk, appendages. And unstriated naman o smooth visceral or involuntary muscles located on the wall of the digestive tract, arteries natin, veins, uterus, bladder, etc. Yung cardiac naman yan nasa ating puso. Specialized type of muscle located in the heart responsible for the contraction and relaxation of the heart. So tapos na tayo sa muscular system. Let's move on to the glandular system. Glandular system is made of glands o yung mga glands natin. Glands are specialized organs with which the secretions are stored in the body purposely for the utilization of the chemical substances or for the discharge of the products if they are no longer products, if they are no longer useful in the body. It is divided into exocrine and endocrine. Ang glandular system natin ang nagre-release ng mga products coming from our body. And also the hormones or chemicals na nanggagaling sa loob ng ating katawan. No, kung kailangan natin na mag-release ng happy hormones, si glandular system ang nagpo-provide niya. At kung tayo pagpapawisan, may tinatawag tayong sweat glands. So, meron tayong dalawang klase ng glands sa glandular system. We have the exocrine and endocrine. So, let's first have exocrine gland. Exocrine gland secretions are stored into ducts or tubes, kaya tinatawag din siya minsan na duct gland. Kasi dito mismo sa mga duct na to, nagkikarry siya ng chemical or substance or product na nagbumula sa ating katawan. So these secretions into the body cavities, into the lumens of various organs, or to external surface of the body are being done by the exocrine gland. So example niyan yung mga tinatawag nating lacriminal, salivary, sebaceous, mammary, and gastric gland. So therefore, when we say exocrine gland, meron siyang tube or duct na dinadaanan or pinag-iistoran ng chemical or product na nanggagaling sa ating katawan. So that's exocrine gland. One of the exocrine glands is the lacrinal drainage system or the lacrinal gland, a gland that secretes tears. It is found in the outer part of its socket as shown in the right side. So So, ang lacrimal gland, ito yung gland na nag-release ng ating tears o luha, o tinatawag din siya minsan na tear gland. Next, we have the salivary gland, which is a gland that secretes saliva. It is found in and around the mouth and throat as shown in figure 17 below. So, ito ay nag-release ng ating laway o saliva na makikita mo sa bibig, sa lalamunan, and around the mouth, as you can see in the picture. Next is sebaceous gland, which is a gland that secretes an oily substance for skin protection from getting dried and scaly, as shown in the right side. Ang sebaceous gland naman natin, ayan yung nagre-release ng oil para hindi maging dry yung skin natin. Okay? And also maging parang scaly o yung medyo parang tuyo-tuyo. The reason why minsan ang skin natin ay tuyo-tuyo is because of the lack of sebaceous secretion of the oily substance. Tinatawag din itong oil gland. Mammary gland. It is a gland that produces milk in all female mammals and is presented in a rudimentary and generally non-functional form in males. Mammary glands are regulated by the endocrine system and become functional in response to the hormonal changes associated with parturition, as shown in the figure 19 at the right side. So, ang mammary gland naman ang nagre-release or nagsisecrete ng milk natin. Sa mga babae, it is very functional, but sa mga lalaki ay hindi functional. So, depende yan sa hormones, lalo na kapag bagong panganak, okay, na nire-release ang ating endocrine gland. Next, we have the gastric gland. It is a gland or a gastric mucosa, secretes 1.2 to 1.5 liters of gastric juice per day. Gastric juice renders food particles soluble, initiates digestion, and converts the gastric contents to a semi-liquid mass called chyme, thus preparing it for further digestion in the small intestine. Gastric juice is a variable mixture of water, hydrochloric acid, electrolytes, and other substances. Gastrin is a hormone that stimulates the secretion of hydrochloric acid. So, ang gastric gland naman natin, ito ang nagre-release ng acid para dumurog ng food natin inside our small intestine. And it is used for digestion. So, gastric gland releases 1.2 to 1.5 liters of gastric juice a day. Imagine kung gaano karami yun. So, again, these are the exocrine glands. The lacrimal drainage system or lacrimal gland, salivary gland, sebaceous gland, mammary gland, and the gastric gland. Next, we have the endocrine glands. So, the endocrine gland term is derived from the Greek endo for within, the crine name for secrete or ductless glands because the secretions are directly stored into the bloodstream, nasa dugo mismo, in the form of hormones. So, the release of hormones into the bloodstream in a way has effect to a wide array of bodily functions and behaviors as shown in the right side. So, ang endocrine glands natin, ito yung major glands natin na nag-release or nagsisecrete ng mismong chemical sa bloodstream o sa dugo natin na tinatawag natin hormones na malaki ang epekto sa ating behavior. These are the endocrine glands. First, we have the pituitary gland. So, it is the gland that secretes many different hormones, some of which affect other glands. So, ito ang tinatawag nilang mother gland or master gland na nagsisecrete ng hormones para ma-stimulate yung iba pa nating mga glands. Next, we have the thyroid gland, which affects the metabolism among other things. So, yung metabolism natin o yung pagpapawis, bowel movement natin. Next, we have the parathyroids, which help regulate level of calcium in the blood. So, ito naman ang nag-regulate ng calcium level natin. That's the parathyroid. Ovary secretes female sex hormones. Ang female sex hormones sa pagbubuntis, that's the role of the ovary. Next, we have the adrenal glands, which help trigger the fight or flight response. So, ang adrenal gland natin, nag-stimulate ng ating fight or flight response. So, kung in times of danger, lalabang ka ba, will you stay or ikaw ay tatakas? So, that's adrenal gland. Nag-release siya ng adrenaline rush. So, next, we have the pancreas, which regulates the level of sugar in the blood. Next, we have the testes, which secretes male sex hormones. So, nag-release ng sex hormones natin, ang testicle gland natin. Next, we have the hypothalamus that controls the pituitary gland. So, all these glands are actually secreting hormones mismo sa ating bloodstream, sa dugo. So again, we have two different kinds of glandular system. So endocrine system and exocrine system. So we're done discussing the brain, the parts of the brain, the lobes of the brain, the functions of the different parts of the brain, and how does it work, and also the different glands, muscles na nandun sa ating buong katawan, kung paano nagsisend ang messages. So we will be discussing next time the different senses natin, no? So maybe this is the end of this topic, and I'll see you next time. Again, my name is Levi Richard B. Isidro, and I'm signing off. Bye-bye. Well, it is time to say goodbye. Thank you for watching. See you next time.